But for the first time in months, Karen found herself really thinking about Jake's family instead of just her own outrage. The little girl's artwork taped to their kitchen window, the soccer car pool, Sarah's gentle attempts at conversation over the fence before all this started. Karen pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos from the past week. Dozens of shots of Jake's grill, the smoke, timestamps, and wind measurements. When had documenting her neighbor's life become her full-time obsession? Her phone buzzed with a text from Michelle. "How's the BBQ situation? Still fighting the good fight?" Karen stared at the message for a long moment, then looked up at Jake's house. The kitchen light was on, and she could see shadows moving around the table, a family sharing dinner together. She started typing several responses, then deleted them all. How could she explain that she'd become someone who called the police on a man making grilled cheese? Someone who spent her days watching her neighbor's every move through camera feeds. The next morning, Karen walked to the sound of Jake's car pulling out of the driveway early, probably taking the kids to school. She looked out her bedroom window and saw something that made her stomach clench, a for sale sign in his front yard. They were moving. She'd won. So why did victory feel so hollow? As Karen made her organic oat milk latte, she wondered what the new neighbors would be like. Maybe they'd be vegan. Maybe they'd understand her need for a peaceful environment. Maybe they'd appreciate the meditation garden and the butterfly sanctuary she'd worked so hard to create. Or maybe they'd be worse than Jake ever was. She sipped her latte and watched a moving truck pull up to the house next door, realizing she might have just solved one problem by creating a much bigger one. The unknown was always more dangerous than the devil you knew. And Jake, for all his faults, had never actually tried to hurt her. The question was, what kind of neighbor had she become in return? The police cruiser pulled up to Willowbrook Estates at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday, just as Jake was flipping his lunch, a simple grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup combo he'd been craving all morning. Officer Martinez stepped out, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Karen emerged from her house before Martinez even reached Jake's front door, wearing her plant-based and proud t-shirt and carrying a thick binder labeled Evidence of Systematic Harassment. "Officer, thank you for responding so quickly," Karen said, slightly breathless. "I've been documenting months of intentional intimidation, and today's incident was the final straw." Martinez looked between Karen and Jake, who was walking over with genuine concern written across his face. "Ma'am, the complaint was about grilling cheese?" "Grilled cheese made with dairy products from tortured cows, cooked deliberately during my daily meditation hour," Karen clarified. "This man has systematically studied my routine and times his animal product consumption to cause maximum psychological distress." Jake's mouth fell open. "Karen, I had no idea you even meditated. I was just making lunch." "Don't pretend this is coincidental," Karen snapped. "Yesterday it was bacon at 7 a.m. Tuesday it was hot dogs at 6 p.m. And now cheese during my sacred centering time. You're weaponizing food against me." Officer Martinez flipped through his notepad. "Ma'am, according to your complaint, you're alleging harassment through cooking. Through the deliberate infliction of animal suffering aromas, yes. It's a form of olfactory assault that violates my religious beliefs and medical needs." Sarah appeared in the doorway, holding their toddler. "Officer, we're just trying to feed our family. We had no idea Karen felt this way." "Felt this way?" Karen's voice rose. "I filed a 47-page formal complaint with the HOA. I had environmental health inspect your torture chamber. I've been more than clear about the trauma you're causing." Martinez cleared his throat. "Ma'am, while I understand you're upset, cooking food on your own property isn't illegal, even if the smell bothers your neighbor." Karen felt the familiar surge of rage that came when people refused to see obvious truth. "So you're telling me that I have no legal protection from this harassment? That anyone can just traumatize their neighbors with impunity? I'm telling you this is a civil matter, not a criminal one." After Martinez left, Karen stood in her driveway, watching Jake apologetically wave at her before disappearing back into his house. The toddler pressed her face against the window, leaving tiny handprints on the glass. That evening, Karen sat in her meditation garden, surrounded by the peace she'd worked so hard to create. Her raised beds flourished with heirloom tomatoes and butternut squash. Her butterfly garden attracted monarchs and swallowtails. Everything she'd built here was beautiful, intentional, life-affirming. The smell of Jake's dinner, some kind of fish, from the scent, drifted over the fence. 3 days later, Karen stood in her driveway at 6:23 am, phone in hand, watching Jake load charcoal into his grill. This was it, deliberate provocation. After receiving her HOA complaint, she hit record. This is Karen Whitmore, documenting continued harassment at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. Despite formal notification of my environmental sensitivities and pending HOA review, the perpetrator is engaging in premeditated smoke assault. Jake noticed her and waved. Morning, Karen. Making breakfast burritos for the soccer team carpool. Soccer team? Karen's voice pitched higher. You're involving children in this. This ritual sacrifice? This is child endangerment. The HOA's response had arrived yesterday, a polite form letter acknowledging her concerns and scheduling her complaint for the next monthly meeting. 3 weeks away. 3 more weeks of breathing murdered cow fumes while they debated her basic human rights. But Karen had done her research. City Ordinance 247.3 prohibited nuisance odors that substantially interfere with neighboring property use. The enforcement hotline had been surprisingly receptive when she called yesterday, especially after she'd mentioned potential health code violations. At 7:15 am, as Jake's breakfast sausages began sizzling, Karen made the call. Yes, I need to report a public health violation at 845 Maple Ridge Drive. The resident is creating toxic smoke conditions that are, yes, I'll hold. 15 minutes later, Environmental Health Inspector Rodriguez arrived in his white city van. Karen met him at the property line, manila folder in hand. Ma'am, I have to tell you, this seems like a pretty standard residential gridding situation, Rodriguez said, surveying Jake's modest setup. Inspector Rodriguez, I appreciate your service, but I need you to understand the systematic nature of this harassment. Karen opened her folder, revealing printed wind pattern charts, time-stamped photos, and her medical documentation. I have severe chemical sensitivities, and this neighbor has deliberately escalated his activities since I filed formal complaints. Jake approached the fence, still holding his spatula, completely bewildered. Is there a problem, officer? Inspector, Rodriguez corrected. We received a complaint about smoke emissions. Mind if I take a look at your setup? Sure, but I'm just making breakfast. I've been grilling here for 8 years without any issues. Karen interjected. Without any issues that you knew about. I've been suffering in silence, documenting every violation until I couldn't take the abuse anymore. Rodriguez examined Jake's grill, checked the wind direction, and took a few notes. Everything looks standard here. No visible violations. What about the particulate matter? The carcinogenic compounds? Karen pressed. I have studies showing that residential meat cooking creates benzopyrene levels that exceed EPA recommendations. Ma'am, that's not really within our jurisdiction for residential cooking. Karen felt her carefully constructed case crumbling. So you're telling me that I have no legal recourse? That anyone can just torture animals and assault their neighbors with impunity? I'm telling you this appears to be a neighbor dispute, not a health code violation. After Rodriguez left, Karen stood alone in her driveway, watching Jake serve breakfast burritos to a van full of 8-year-old soccer players. Their laughter felt like mockery. That afternoon, she called her sister Michelle in Portland. They're all part of the system, Michelle. The HOA, the city, they're all protecting the meat industrial complex. Karen, honey, maybe you could just talk to Jake directly. Ask him to use his back patio instead of the side yard. This isn't about compromise anymore. This is about principle. By evening, Karen had found her next avenue, the police non-emergency line. If the city wouldn't recognize environmental assault, maybe they'd understand harassment and intimidation. Jake's deliberate morning grilling, his cheerful waves, his offers of food, it was all psychological warfare designed to break her spirit. She began documenting everything with military precision. Every time Jake looked in her direction, every waft of smoke that crossed the property line, every moment her peace was shattered by his carnivorous aggression. This was war now, and Karen Whitmore had never lost a war. Karen Whitmore pressed her face against her kitchen window, her perfectly manicured nails leaving small scratches on the glass as she gripped the sill. The smell hit her like a physical blow: charred flesh, smoky torture, the systematic murder of innocent beings wafting directly into her meditation garden. This is literally a hate crime, she whispered to herself, pulling out her phone to document the atrocity. Through her Ring camera app, she zoomed in on her neighbor Jake's backyard, where he was flipping burgers on his brand new Weber grill, completely oblivious to the trauma he was inflicting. Karen had moved to Willowbrook Estates specifically for its mindful living community marketing, a phrase that clearly implied plant-based consciousness, not this barbaric display of carnivorous violence. She paid premium HOA fees for serenity, not sensory assault. "Jake," she called over the fence, her voice carrying the authority of someone who chaired 3 different neighborhood committees. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to the atmospheric quality of this shared space?" Jake looked up, spatula in hand, genuinely confused. "Hey Karen, just making some burgers for the kids. Want one?" The audacity. Karen's face flushed crimson. "I want you to understand that your actions are creating a hostile environment. The smoke from your carnage is directly violating my right to peaceful enjoyment of my property. It's just a BBQ, Karen. It's Saturday. Just a BBQ." Karen's voice cracked with disbelief. "You're literally torturing animals in front of my meditation space. This is psychological warfare." Jake's wife, Sarah, emerged from their house, carrying a plate of corn on the cob. "Everything okay out here?" Karen saw her opportunity. "Sarah, I need you both to understand that I have documented environmental sensitivities. This smoke is triggering my anxiety disorder, and frankly, it's a form of discrimination against people with my dietary beliefs." Sarah and Jake exchanged glances. "Karen, we're on our own property," Sarah said gently, "and it's not against any HOA rules to grill." "Yet," Karen muttered, already formulating her plan. She'd served as HOA secretary for 2 years before stepping down due to philosophical differences with the board's regressive policies. But she still had connections, still had influence. That evening, Karen sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, drafting what she would later call the Willowbrook Manifesto. She meticulously documented every instance of neighborhood grilling over the past 6 months, cross-referencing wind patterns with her daily wellness journal entries that showed correlation between BBQ days and her spiritual disruption levels. By midnight, she'd compiled a 47-page complaint to the HOA board, complete with air quality concerns, property value impacts, and a detailed legal brief on olfactory harassment. The centerpiece was her proposal for Amendment 23C, a complete ban on outdoor cooking of animal products within Willowbrook Estates. She hit send at 12:47 am, then immediately began drafting her backup plan, a formal complaint to the city's environmental health department. If the HOA wouldn't protect her rights, she'd escalate to authorities who understood real justice. Karen fell asleep that night with a smile, already imagining Jake's face when he received the cease and desist order. This was just the beginning.